When P. Diddy crossed the threshold of federal prison, he did not yet realize how much the rules of the game had changed. His fame, money and connections, which once opened any door in the world of show business, meant nothing here. In prison, other laws ruled, the laws of force, fear and loyalty to the gang. The first days passed relatively calmly. He kept himself aloof, trying not to attract unnecessary attention. But dark clouds were gathering. In the corridors, a story was already whispered, which began to stir up anger among the prisoners. It was said that Diddy had given federal agents information about some major criminal groups, and this is what helped him to avoid serious problems with the law for so long. At first, it seemed like just rumors, but they spread too quickly, as if someone had purposefully blown them up. The names that appeared in these stories were too accurate, and the details, too specific. This wasn't a random gossip, it was a well-thought-out information attack. One evening, when P. Diddy was returning to his cell after speaking with his lawyer, he was surrounded by 4 men. All of them had tattoos that indicated their affiliation with a major gang. Diddy didn't have time to say a word when he received the first blow to the stomach that knocked the wind out of him. "You thought we wouldn't find out?" one of them said, grabbing him by the collar and pushing his face against the cold wall. The next blows were even harder. Wheezing, pain, blood on the floor, and only the laughter of the abusers could be heard in the dark corridor. But who was behind these rumors? Who organized this beating? The answer to this question was supposed to stun everyone. P. Diddy lay on the cold floor, feeling how each blow left a mark on his body. Blood was dripping from his broken lip, and there was only one question in his mind: who? When the guards finally intervened, the attackers had already disappeared into the shadows. Diddy was picked up and taken to the medical center. But even there he didn't feel safe. The eyes of the other prisoners watched him, full of contempt and suspicion. The next day, his lawyer came to see him. But instead of legal nuances, he whispered something that made Combs cool. "That's a pretext," the lawyer said, leaning closer. "You're involved in a game much bigger than you could have imagined." Sean looked up. "Who did it?" The lawyer was silent for a few seconds, as if considering whether to speak. "Some of your old friends. And those you've dealt with, in power circles." P. Diddy clenched his fists. It all came together. He knew too much. He knew about the deals that were made behind closed doors, about the millions in money flows, about the politicians and influential businessmen who used his connections for their own interests. And now someone decided to remove him. But that was only the beginning. The prison had become a death trap, and outside it his empire was collapsing like a house of cards. Diddy sat in his cell, slowly wiping the blood from his face. The pain in his ribs was unbearable, but that was not what worried him anymore. He understood the main thing: this was not just a random beating. This was a signal. A warning. The next morning, one of the prisoners approached him, a thin man with tattoos that gave away his connection to the Mexican cartel. He put a plastic tray of food on the table in front of Diddy and sat down opposite him. "Survived?" The man smiled, unceremoniously taking out a cigarette. P. Diddy was silent. "Don't worry," the man took a drag. "They'll be back. And next time the guards might not make it." Sean leaned forward slightly. "Who's behind this?" The man smiled even wider. "You think this is just some kind of prison showdown?" "Oh, no, my friend. This is a whole other level of play." He paused, giving Diddy a chance to process what he had heard. "You thought you could walk into big offices, play with billionaires and remain untouchable? They framed you, and now they want you to rot here. Or better yet, to be carried out with your feet first." Diddy felt rage boiling inside him. He understood that someone at the top had decided to remove him, but the main question remained open: who? The man rose from the table. "If you want to survive, you need allies. Because you don't have much time left." With that, he left, leaving Diddy alone in the approaching chaos. Diddy realized that the situation had become even more dangerous than he had thought. The prison was not just filled with random criminals, there were clear groups of influence operating here. And if someone from the top wanted him dead, it meant they had more control than he could have imagined. The next day, when he went out into the prison yard, the same Mexican approached him again. "Your own people want to take you out," he said quietly, while Diddy stared off into the distance. "The gang that beat you up got orders. But they don't understand the whole game." Sean raised his eyebrows. "What do you mean?" The Mexican was silent for a moment, then whispered. "You have an old friend. He knows the truth. But he's not your ally." "And who is he?" Diddy asked, barely audible. The man took a small piece of paper from his pocket and placed it on the bench next to him. "You'll see when you're alone." And he left without even turning around. P. Diddy sat there for a minute longer, until he felt himself being watched closely. He carefully took the note and put it in his pocket, then headed for his cell. Only when he was alone did he unfold it. There was only one name written on the paper. Jay-Z. Diddy felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. It wasn't just a blow. It was a treacherous stab in the back. P. Diddy sat on the hard mattress of his prison cell, clutching the note in his trembling fingers. Jay-Z. Could he have imagined that the person he had spent so many years with in show business would suddenly become his most dangerous enemy? Memories flooded his mind: loud parties, joint deals, closed meetings with politicians and businessmen, where they discussed not only music, but also serious financial schemes. They had always been considered competitors, but there was a moment when they worked towards a common goal: to become untouchable. But now, it seemed, someone had decided that only one could be untouchable. Game of survival. The next morning, Diddy was approached by another acquaintance, Courtney Crimson Blake, a former drug dealer whom he had once pulled off the streets and even helped invest in a business. Now Crimson was here, in prison, and he looked like he knew more than he was letting on. "Hey, you found out who's behind this," he muttered, sitting down across from Sean in the yard. Diddy glared at him. "Is that true?" he asked quietly. Crimson nodded. "Yeah, man. Jay-Z is working with the top. He made a deal before you were even put in. They used you, and now they want to get rid of you so you don't talk." P. Diddy clenched his fists. "What evidence?" Crimson smiled. "There are people who can confirm. But they want something in return." "What exactly?" The man leaned closer. "They need you to help them hack a system. Access to files that could blow up the whole game." Diddy tensed. He knew something big was at stake. "If I do this, will I get out of here alive?" Crimson looked him straight in the eye. "If you do this right, you won't just survive. You'll take back your empire." Sean took a deep breath. The game was just beginning. Diddy knew this was his only chance. If he wanted to get out of this hell, he had to play by his own rules. But to regain his power, he had to deal with the one who had betrayed him first. That night, he received another message, this time from one of the guards. A small note, wrapped in a plastic bag, had been slipped under his mattress. "You have 3 days left. Act or disappear." It was a warning. A secret alliance. The next day, he met Crimson again in the shower, where the surveillance cameras were off. "We have a plan," Crimson said, his voice drowned out by the sound of the water. "But we need your help." "What exactly?" Diddy asked. "You still have connections on the outside. There are people who don't want you dead. But they won't do anything until they see that you're ready to play for real." "And how am I supposed to prove it?" Crimson smiled. "We need access to the same system I told you about. There are files in there that could burn down Jay-Z's entire empire. If we get them, we'll have leverage." Diddy clutched his head. He knew exactly what he was talking about. These files were evidence of money transfers, shell companies, offshore accounts used not only by rappers but also by high-ranking officials. This was a real gold mine. But the only person who could get these files. "You want me to contact Cassie?" he asked, remembering his ex-girlfriend. Crimson nodded. "She's the only one who can still trust you." "But do you trust her?" Diddy clenched his jaw. He knew that if he went down this path, there would be no turning back. But if he wants to survive, he has to make a bet. And it will be a cruel game. Diddy had no choice. He knew he had to act now or he would be dragged out of this prison feet first. He needed a way out. And the only person who could help was Cassie. Through his connections, he gave her a message, short and clear: "If I die, they'll come for you. Do it." He knew she would understand. The operation began. The next 48 hours were the most important of his life. Crimson reported that Cassie had given the signal. She had accessed Jay-Z's files. Documents containing information about corruption schemes, offshore accounts, and even connections to politicians were being passed on to people who wanted revenge. But then something unexpected happened. Jay-Z reacted faster. The day before the documents were to be released to the press, Diddy was summoned to meet with his lawyer. When he entered the room, it wasn't his lawyer sitting in front of him. It was Jay-Z himself. "You think you won?" he said quietly, clutching a glass of water in his hands. Diddy didn't answer. He just stared at him. "You know this game isn't about rap. It's not about money. It's about power. And power doesn't apologize." Jay-Z leaned forward. "I'm giving you one last chance. Stay quiet, and maybe you'll still be able to live." Diddy smiled, wiped the blood from his lip, and whispered. "Too late." By that point, the files had already been handed over. The final payback. A week after that meeting, the media exploded. The scandal surrounding Jay-Z had gained momentum. A wave of investigations, frozen accounts, interrogations. The people who supported his empire began to turn away. What about Diddy? A month later, he was transferred to a special protection program. His sentence was being reviewed. He was no longer just a prisoner, he had become a key figure in a case that could shake the entire system. He was last seen getting into a black car with tinted windows, leaving prison. Some say he had made a deal with the authorities. Others say he had simply outsmarted the game. But one thing was clear: an empire may fall, but its creator never gives up.